The moment my husband walked through the door with that family behind him, I knew my birthday would not end with candles, but with truth. I remember standing there in the soft yellow glow of our living room lamp, still wearing the apron I'd tied on that morning. The scent of cardamom tea lingered in the air, and a half-frosted cake sat waiting on the counter. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, just me, my husband, and maybe a few calls from friends. I wasn't expecting anything grand. I had long ago stopped expecting surprises from him. But nothing could have prepared me for the surprise he did bring. The front door clicked open. I glanced up, smiling out of habit, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. And then I saw them. A woman in her late 40s, holding a purse close to her chest. Beside her stood a young man and a teenage girl, both looking unsure, shifting their weight, eyes darting around my home as though they weren't sure they belonged, or maybe they knew they didn't. My husband stood in front of them, his shoulders drooping in a way I had never seen before. He looked like a man walking his own funeral procession. "Happy birthday," he murmured, not meeting my eyes. Something cold and heavy slid down my spine. I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron, slowly, calmly, because if I didn't control my movements, I wasn't sure I could control anything else. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice quiet enough that even I barely recognized it. He swallowed. The woman behind him blinked rapidly, as if trying to brace herself. "These are," he took a breath, his voice trembling for the first time in the 30 years I had known him. "My other family." The room tilted for a moment. My hands, still warm from baking, turned ice cold. The air around me thinned. I felt my knees soften, but I forced myself to stay upright, to keep breathing, to keep my face still. I don't know why, maybe because falling apart in front of strangers felt like a second humiliation. "My what?" I whispered. He didn't repeat it. He didn't have to. The woman looked at me with wide, uncomfortable eyes, guilt etched into the tight lines of her face. The young man couldn't look at me at all. The teenage girl clutched her mother's hand, her lips pressed thin like she wished she were anywhere else. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something inside me settle. Like dust after a long storm. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a bridge collapses. I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment, all the small things I had ignored over the years suddenly rearranged themselves into clarity. I turned slowly, walked to the counter, and picked up the small box I had placed beside the cake earlier. I had wrapped it neatly, tied it with a ribbon. It was meant to be a gift for him, something simple but thoughtful. I walked back to him, each step deliberate, and placed the box in his hands. His eyebrows drew together. "What is this?" "A birthday gift," I said. "For you." His fingers trembled as he held it. He glanced back at the woman, the one he had shared 30 hidden years with, and then at me. He didn't know that the box he held wasn't a gift at all. It was the beginning of the end. And the beginning of his truth. I exhaled slowly, tasting the bitter air on my tongue. "But before you open it," I said softly, "you and I need to talk." And that was the moment everything began to unravel. If you had asked me just a week before that moment, I would have told you my marriage was steady. Not perfect, not romantic, not full of fireworks, just steady in the way two people become after decades of shared routines. Our mornings were quiet. He liked his tea strong, I liked mine with milk. He read the news while I watered the plants on our balcony. On Sundays, he ironed his shirts while I baked something sweet for the neighbors' kids. It wasn't a grand love story, but it was familiar, a rhythm our lives had settled into. Sometimes, in the evenings, I'd watch him fall asleep on the sofa with the TV humming softly, and I'd feel a strange kind of peace. A simple gratitude that after so many years, we still had each other. We had built a home out of ordinary moments, and I thought that was enough. Looking back now, I realize how much I wanted it to be enough. Our children were grown, living their own lives in different cities. They called on weekends, sent pictures of grandkids I adored through the screen. My husband and I had entered that quiet stage of life where companionship mattered more than passion, where the comfort of another person's presence meant safety. Perhaps that's why I missed the signs. Perhaps that's why the absence of drama felt like security, not silence. I remember the week leading up to my birthday. I had asked him, casually, not expecting much, if he wanted to invite anyone over. He looked up from his phone, blinking as though I'd interrupted something he didn't want me to see. No, he said quickly. Let's keep it simple this year. I smiled. Simple is fine. He nodded and went back to the glowing screen he always kept angled slightly away from me. It didn't strike me as unusual at the time. Phones create distance even between the happiest couples. I told myself that. Reminded myself that everyone had secrets, even me. Small ones. Harmless ones. But his were not small. In those days, I noticed little things, though I brushed them aside. He started coming home later, smelling faintly of a perfume I didn't own. He seemed exhausted in a way that didn't match the workload he claimed to have. His shirts sometimes carried a single long hair, dark, not mine. Still, I said nothing. You see, after 30 years of marriage, you learn which questions bring only pain. And I had convinced myself that stability was more important than honesty. On the morning of my birthday, he left early, telling me he had meetings to attend. His voice was unusually gentle, almost apologetic. He kissed my forehead, something he hadn't done in months, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the man I married. I spent the day preparing a small dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just chicken slow-cooked with spices, soft rice, and the cake I always baked for myself, vanilla with pistachio frosting. The house smelled warm and welcoming, the way I liked it. I set the table for two. I put on the earrings he gave me years ago. I stood by the window, waiting to hear his car pull into the driveway. And when it finally did, my heart did that small flutter it still occasionally remembered how to do. I smoothed my dress, fixed my hair, and walked to the door, practicing a smile. But the moment I opened it, there they were. A family that didn't belong to me. A family that belonged to him. A family that had been living in the shadows of my life for 3 decades. And as he stood there, avoiding my eyes, the warmth of my home suddenly felt cold, like it was never truly mine to begin with. I didn't know then that the gift box I'd hand him would become the final thread pulling apart the life I thought I knew. Now that I look back, the story didn't begin on my birthday. It began months earlier, quietly, like a breeze brushing past a half-open window. Too gentle to grab my attention, but enough to make the curtains sway. The first clue arrived on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. I had been cleaning our bedroom, folding laundry while the late sunlight settled on the bedspread. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a soft, persistent vibration that didn't stop after the first ring. I wouldn't normally touch his phone. We respected each other's privacy, or at least that's what I believed. But something about the way it kept buzzing, something about the urgency in the sound, made me glance over. A name flashed across the screen. Aisha. I didn't know an Aisha. My husband didn't mention one either. The message preview showed only a few words. We need to talk. It's about the children. Children. Plural. My stomach tightened, but I pushed the thought away immediately, almost violently. I told myself it could be a colleague, maybe she needed help with something. Maybe she was a relative I'd forgotten about. Maybe I didn't want to know the truth. When he came home that evening, I mentioned it, as casually as I could. Someone named Aisha called you today. He froze for a fraction of a second, a tiny, almost invisible pause, before he forced a smile. Oh. Yes. Work-related. Work. I asked, folding the dish towel carefully. She said something about children. He laughed lightly, too quickly. Her department works with youth volunteers. It wasn't anything important. I nodded, pretending to believe him. Pretending that the crack in his voice was light reflecting off glass, not a fracture forming. Another clue showed up 2 weeks later. He had gone out for groceries, but when he returned, he didn't carry any bags, just a distracted expression and a folded receipt he shoved deep into his pocket. He smelled faintly of a perfume I didn't own. Floral. Something soft and unfamiliar, clinging to him like it didn't want to leave. I followed him to the kitchen. You didn't buy anything? He blinked, as though he'd forgotten the excuse he told me. Ah, yes, the store was closed. In the middle of the day? He shrugged. They were restocking. I'll go tomorrow. A lie. I felt it in the hollow of the room, lingering between us like stale air. Another time, he came home exhausted, loosening his tie as he entered. He moved like a man carrying a burden too heavy for one life. He sat on the sofa and rubbed his temples in silence. I sat beside him. You look tired. Work's been hectic, he muttered. But I looked at the dark circles under his eyes. The red rim around them. The distant way he stared at the wall, as if seeing a memory instead of paint. This wasn't work exhaustion. This was guilt. But again, I swallowed my curiosity. I didn't want to disturb the fragile peace we had. I told myself that all marriages had phases, that all spouses kept small secrets, that we would eventually talk like we always did. But we didn't. He grew quieter. More restless. His smiles became thinner, worn down by something he refused to share. On some nights, he stepped outside to take calls, speaking in hushed tones. When I asked who it was, he waved me off gently, like a mother calming a child. It's nothing you need to worry about. But that was exactly when I began to worry. The final clue, the one that jolted something deep in my chest, came the day before my birthday. He stood by the mirror, adjusting his shirt, but his hands trembled slightly. His eyes kept wandering to his phone on the dresser. I watched him from the doorway. Are you okay? I asked. He didn't look at me when he answered. Everything's fine. I just have a lot on my mind. And then, almost as if he forgot I was standing there, he whispered under his breath. It's time. I stepped closer. What did you say? He blinked, startled. Nothing. Just talking to myself. Time for what? I didn't ask. Maybe I should have. Because the next day, on my birthday, he walked through the door with the answer. A whole family standing behind him. A whole hidden past unraveling at my feet. And all those clues I ignored came rushing back like a flood I was no longer strong enough to hold back. There is a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels suspended. Heavy. Waiting. That was the silence sitting between us after my husband stepped inside with the strangers who weren't strangers at all. I closed the door gently behind them. The air felt tight, almost swollen, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The woman clutched her handbag like it was armor. The young man kept shifting on his feet. The teenage girl stared down at her shoes. None of them spoke. My husband stood in the center of the room, holding the gift box I'd placed in his hands, but he looked like he was afraid to breathe. Finally, I broke the silence. Sit, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It was calm, too calm, the way a lake looks moments before a storm cracks the surface. They sat on the sofa. My husband remained standing as if his legs didn't trust the cushions. I stood opposite them, my hands clasped lightly in front of me. Now, I said, explain. The woman inhaled shakily. My name is Aisha, she whispered. I'm my wife, my husband blurted out. The word hit me like a blunt object. Wife. Not partner. Not someone I knew long ago. Not mistake. Wife. I stared at him, the room narrowing around my vision. Wife, I repeated softly, tasting the bitterness of it. He nodded, his head dropping like it weighed more than he could carry. For 30 years. My lips parted, but no sound came out. 30 years. The same years he spent with me. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, but with a quiet, devastating snap. Not the kind that shatters, but the kind that splits slowly down the middle, like an old log finally giving way. I looked at the young man, tall, early 20s. He looked painfully uncomfortable. The teenage girl beside him shifted closer to her mother. They didn't say anything, but their eyes said enough: shame, confusion, fear. Are they? I couldn't finish the sentence. He nodded again. My children. My heart clenched. I pressed a hand against my chest, as though trying to keep something inside from spilling out. Aisha began to cry. I told him we couldn't keep living like this, she said quietly. That the lies were destroying all of us. He said he had to tell you before. Before what? I asked, turning to him. Before I found out myself? Before someone else told me the truth? Before your secrets collapsed on top of all of us? He winced. Before my birthday gift, he murmured. I blinked, confused. What birthday gift? He lifted the small wrapped box I had given him. This. I thought you knew. I frowned. Knew what? He swallowed hard. Open it. Something in his voice made me step forward. Slowly, I reached out and took the box back. The ribbon felt suddenly frayed under my fingers. My breath trembled as I pulled at the knot, peeling the paper back. Inside was a small hardcover envelope, the kind that holds medical documents. My fingers tightened around it. What is this? He looked at me with hollow eyes. My diagnosis. I opened the flap. A hospital logo. A doctor's name. And then the words. Stage 4. Terminal. My breath caught. The floor felt unsteady. He continued quietly, his voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I've been sick for a long time. I kept it hidden. I didn't want to worry you. But then the doctors told me it's progressing too fast. I stared at him, stunned. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. You're dying, I whispered. He nodded once. I wanted to bring everyone together before I ran out of time. Aisha covered her face, crying silently. The young man cleared his throat, his voice small. He told us last month. We didn't want to come, but he said he didn't want to die with lies around him. My legs trembled. I reached blindly for the table to steady myself. 30 years of betrayal, revealed in the same breath as his dying confession. My husband stepped toward me, tears slipping down his face. I never meant to hurt you. I loved you, I still love you. But I loved them too. I thought I could manage both lives. I thought I could protect you. I stared at him, my voice barely audible. Protect me? By lying to me for 3 decades? By making me share you without knowing? By building a life on secrets? He dropped to his knees, something I had never seen him do in all our years of marriage. I know. I know I ruined everything. But I didn't want to die without being honest. You deserve the truth. Anger surged through me, mixing with grief and disbelief. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unwelcome. I took a step back. You didn't do this for me. You did this for yourself. Because you're afraid of dying with guilt. That's not honesty. That's desperation. He flinched as if I'd struck him. Aisha wiped her tears and whispered, I told him this was selfish, but he said you had the right to know. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't my enemy. She was another woman who had also lived in his shadow, in his secrets. Her eyes held pain, exhaustion, maybe even guilt. But not malice. I turned back to him. So you thought my birthday, was the right moment to break my entire life apart? He bowed his head. There is no right moment, but I have no more time. Silence. Raw, slicing silence. I set the medical envelope on the table, my hands trembling. I need air, I whispered. And before anyone could stop me, I walked out of the living room, out of the house, into the night air. The cold hit my face like a slap. The world outside felt too big. Too wide. Too real. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the cracks spreading through the life I had spent 30 years building. He was dying. He had betrayed me. And now? I had to decide what to do with a truth that arrived far too late. I walked down our street slowly, letting the cold evening air numb my skin. Neighbors' porch lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere in the distance, someone was frying onions. The smell drifted through the wind, warm and familiar, anchoring me just enough to keep breathing. My life, the one I thought I knew, had cracked open in the span of minutes. A second wife. 2 children. 30 years of deception. And a terminal illness I didn't know about. I wrapped my arms tightly around myself, feeling something sharp and hollow spreading through my chest. I wasn't angry enough to scream, and I wasn't broken enough to collapse. I existed in that strange, fragile space between fury and shock, a place where every heartbeat felt too loud. After a few minutes, I sat on the low stone wall outside our house. The chill sank into my bones, grounding me. I watched my breath fog in front of me, small clouds dissolving into the night. I thought about the years. The small anniversaries. The quiet breakfasts. The nights he pretended to work late. The perfume I never wore. The name Aisha. He hadn't slipped. He had been careful. Meticulous. A man who lied with precision. And yet, he stood in my living room tonight, trembling like a child caught stealing from a jar. I closed my eyes. I needed to act. I needed clarity, not rage, because the truth was bigger than just betrayal now. It involved a dying man. Children. A woman who had lived in secrecy just like I had, though her version of secrecy was twisted differently. After a long minute, I stood and walked back inside. The living room was heavy with tension. The teenagers sat quietly. Aisha dabbed her eyes with a tissue. My husband looked up as I entered, his face pale with fear. I'm not going to scream, I said softly, closing the door behind me. I'm not going to throw anyone out. But I need answers, clearly, honestly, and without excuses. My husband nodded, swallowing. Ask anything. I sat in the single armchair across from them, deliberately placing distance between us. Start from the beginning, I said. No summaries. No shortcuts. Tell me everything. He hesitated, but then something inside him collapsed, and he began to talk. I met Aisha before I met you, he said quietly. We were young. Stupid. In love. But her family didn't approve of me. They forced her into a distant arrangement, and we lost each other. Aisha stared at her hands, silent. When I met you, he continued, I thought that chapter of my life was over. I truly did. I married you because I loved you. Our life together wasn't fake. But, I asked, leaning forward. But the year after we married, I ran into her again. She had left her family. She was alone. And things happened. Aisha's voice cracked. I didn't know he had married. I swear. When I found out, I tried to end it. He nodded. But then she got pregnant. I panicked. I didn't want to destroy the life I'd already built with you. I told myself I'd manage both families until I figured out what to do. I forced myself to breathe slowly. And you never figured it out? He shook his head, ashamed. I kept thinking I'd tell you someday. But every year that passed made it harder. I felt trapped. I wanted to protect both families, but in the end, I failed everyone. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I pressed my fingers against my temple. And you kept them hidden for 30 years. He nodded weakly. The teenage girl looked up suddenly, her voice trembling. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want to be anyone's secret. We're just stuck in the middle. Her words pierced through me more sharply than her father's confessions. I took a long breath, letting their story settle in the air. Painful. Complicated. Human. Then I spoke. I need space, I said firmly. Not forever. But now. He nodded, understanding. Or maybe surrendering. I stood up. Tonight, you will all stay. You're not leaving in the middle of this mess. But tomorrow, I need time to think. He whispered, thank you. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the spare room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. My hands trembled against the blanket. My heartbeat still felt wrong, too slow, too heavy. I stared at the wall, breathing through the weight in my chest. And then a thought came to me, a quiet, steady thought. He is dying. As betrayed as I felt, as broken as I was, the truth was undeniable. And I had to decide what mattered more now, punishing him for his past or guiding him through what remained of his future. For the first time, I realized the next steps weren't about revenge. They were about dignity. His and mine. Morning light has a way of exposing everything, dust on shelves, cracks in walls, and truths we pretend we can sleep through. I woke before anyone else. For a moment, in that soft gray light, I forgot the night before. I lay there listening to the faint sounds of the house, the refrigerator humming, a car passing outside, a distant bird calling, and I let myself pretend everything was normal. But the ache in my chest reminded me quickly. I went to the kitchen, tying my robe tighter around me. Habit made me reach for the kettle. Routine is a strange comfort, even when the ground beneath you has shifted. I was pouring water into the teapot when I heard quiet footsteps. Aisha stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked tired, not from last night, but from years of carrying something heavy. Good morning, she said softly. I nodded. Morning. An awkward silence settled between us. Not hostile, just painfully unfamiliar. She took a hesitant step forward. I didn't sleep, she whispered. Neither did I. I want you to know, she continued, voice trembling, that I never wanted this. Not this chaos. Not this hurt. I looked at her fully, and for the first time, I didn't see a rival. I saw a woman who had survived her own kind of betrayal. A woman who had lived decades in the shadows of my life, just as I had unknowingly lived in hers. I know, I said quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. He said last night that you're kind. That you're strong. And sitting here now. I see he was right. I exhaled slowly, not trusting my voice, so I turned back to pour the tea as she wiped her eyes. Moments later, my husband walked in. He looked frail, as though he had aged years overnight. His usually neat hair was tousled, his shoulders slumped. When he saw me, his face softened with a grief I couldn't read without feeling something twist inside. We didn't speak. But the silence was different today, not tight, not threatening. Just tired. Then, around 8, my doorbell rang. I frowned. When I opened it, my sister stood there, arms crossed, eyebrows raised, holding a bakery box. Happy birthday, she began, then froze as she saw Aisha and the children in the hallway behind me. Her eyes widened. What is this? Who are they? My stomach dropped. This wasn't how she was supposed to find out. My husband appeared behind me, leaning heavily on the wall. My sister's mouth fell open as realization washed over her. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Don't tell me. Is this what I think it is?" I closed my eyes briefly, gathering the last pieces of dignity I had left. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's exactly what you think." My sister's voice rose in a sharp whisper. 30 years? You hid this from her for 30 years? The children flinched. Aisha lowered her gaze. Neighbors stepped out onto their porches, glancing over with curiosity at the commotion. The kind of quiet street where nothing dramatic ever happened, until now. My husband's face flushed with shame. "Please," he said weakly. "Not here." But my sister was furious. "You humiliated her. You destroyed her life. You lied to everyone." "Syra," I said firmly, forcing calm into my tone, "stop." She blinked at me. "You're defending him?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." The words left my mouth before I could think them through, but I meant them. I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me, separating us from the watching eyes. My sister looked at me, heartbreak softening her anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know," I whispered. "Not until last night." Her face crumpled. She hugged me hard, the kind of embrace that cracks open the part of you holding everything together. "I'm so sorry," she breathed into my shoulder. Inside the house, I could hear faint murmurs, the sound of my husband trying to explain, Aisha calming the children, the tension clinging to every word. "And he's sick," I said quietly. My sister pulled back. "Sick?" "Terminal." Her expression shifted, from anger to disbelief to sorrow. Oh, my God." We stood in silence for a long moment. The world felt strangely split, betrayal on one side, mortality on the other. And I stood in the middle, holding both truths like fragile glass. My sister squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll stand with you." I nodded, grateful. When we walked back inside, the room fell silent. My husband sat with his head in his hands. But this time, something was different. The truth wasn't just between us anymore. It was out. It was real. It was seen. No more shadows. No more hiding. The consequences had begun, not through anger or vengeance, but through the quiet, undeniable exposure of truth. And now the world around us, family, neighbors, community, would witness what happened next. Not out of spectacle, but out of accountability. If you've ever stood at the edge of a cliff, toes curled over the rock, heart banging against your ribs, unsure whether to step back or forward. That was me the next morning. Except instead of a cliff, it was my marriage. Instead of rocks beneath me, it was a lifetime of lies. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was that woman's face, her trembling voice repeating the same sentence like a curse carved into my skin. "We didn't leave you," he hit us. The clock read 5:14 a.m. when I finally sat up in bed. Sunlight had not yet touched the curtains. The house was still, suffocatingly quiet. He slept beside me, one arm thrown over his chest, breathing steadily, like a man who had already decided something. And suddenly I knew. I couldn't wait for him to reveal his version of the truth. I needed my truth. So I got out of bed. My feet were ice against the floor, but I barely felt it. I went to the living room, sat on the sofa, and stared at the front door like I expected the woman Thaisha to walk in again. My phone buzzed. A WhatsApp message. From an unknown number. My hands trembled as I tapped it open. "I'm sorry for yesterday. But you deserve to know everything. If you want answers, come alone. Please." A location pin followed. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just a truth. This was a trapdoor opening under the last piece of normalcy I had. I stared at the message for a long time. Long enough for the birds outside to start their morning chatter. Long enough for the sky to shift from black to indigo to faint gray. He hadn't woken up yet. He didn't know I'd seen the message. And for once, I didn't wake him. I got dressed, simple clothes, nothing special, and slipped out of the house with quiet steps, each one echoing louder in my chest than on the tiled floor. The meeting. The location pin led me to an old apartment complex on the other side of the city. Paint peeling, balconies crooked, a stray cat watching me like it knew my life was unraveling. Apartment 202. Second floor. My fingers shook as I rang the doorbell. She opened it almost immediately. Aisha. Her eyes were swollen, like she hadn't slept either. Behind her, I saw two small children, siblings, maybe 4 and 6, playing with blocks on the floor. They looked up when they saw me, curious, innocent. Her voice was softer today. Please, come in. I stepped inside. My heart didn't. It stayed back at the doorway, clawing at my ribs. We sat at a small dining table. She poured water into a glass but didn't drink any. Neither did I. Then she spoke. And for the first time, she didn't cry. He lied to both of us. I swallowed hard. Tell me. She took a deep breath. He told me he was separated. He told me you moved abroad for work. He said he was finalizing a divorce and needed time. I closed my eyes, pain surging through me like electric current. She continued. He didn't let us near anyone. He said people from his old life would misunderstand. I believed him. I believed everything. But when he began avoiding us, when money got tight, when he disappeared for days, I found out. Her voice broke. He wasn't separated. He wasn't getting a divorce. He was living a double life. My hands gripped my knees so tightly my fingers turned white. Aisha leaned forward, her voice trembling with something between anger and heartbreak. I confronted him last month. He begged me not to tell you. He said it would destroy his family. He said he just needed more time. But yesterday, when he walked into your house with us. She hesitated, tears pooling. That was his last try. His last attempt to force you to accept it instead of confessing. I stared at her, disbelief and nausea twisting inside me like two snakes fighting. You think I would accept this? My voice cracked. No. She shook her head. I don't think you should accept any of this. I came yesterday because I thought you knew and didn't care. But after I saw your face, I realized you were as lost as I was. Her fingers intertwined in a nervous knot. And then she whispered something that shattered the last unbroken part of me. He promised us both the same life. I felt my breath leave my body. Her next words were even worse. And I think he planned to choose one of us. My body went cold. Choose? Like we were options on a menu? Like we were two doors he could try on before deciding which view he preferred? I stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. Aisha reached out, grabbing my wrist gently. Please, whatever you decide, remember, he played us both. I pulled my hand away. I know. But I didn't know. Not fully. Not yet. I left her apartment feeling like I was walking underwater, everything muffled, distorted, slow. The truth wasn't just a knife. It was a blade he had sharpened against both our hearts. And when I stepped outside, sunlight finally spilling across the pavement, I realized something. He had no idea that I now held the truth he feared the most. And I wasn't going home to ask him questions. I was going home to confront him.